Okay, welcome to another episode of the Critical Introverts podcast. I'm your host, Senor Filth, with my co-host, the Benevolent Asshole. And today we have a new guest. We have Hannah Quintero. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. I'm Hannah Quintero, and I'm a Christian artist. My studio and slash home is based in Divine, Texas, which is like a tiny little town south of San Antonio, aka South Texas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, so I guess let's just kind of get into it. You describe yourself as a Christian artist. I mean, what I sort of like categorizes you as a Christian artist is what makes you a Christian artist?
Well, aside from myself, I'm a Christian, born and raised.
Mm-hmm.
Since my running joke in my family was just that my parents would always say that I was praising God in my walker,
Mm-hmm.
and I was homeschooled throughout my childhood. So, and it's quite extensive, but how I bring that into my art per se is just I want to honor God through this, just through my different art pieces. And it's not I can't really say it's like in the traditional sense where when everybody thinks of Christian artwork, they automatically think of the Renaissance. Like
Mm-hmm.
everything is very explicit as far as in religious icons and symbols and things of that nature. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of my paintings, because I do primarily acrylic paintings, I do little mini oil paintings. I do a mixture of mediums.
Mm-hmm.
I do book binding as well. Right now, I've been dabbling into painting on glass, so I've been kind of like experimenting and doing other things too.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of my artwork is, I like to say, it's a mixture of story. I like to tell stories through my art. Or a lot of my art is symbolic.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole point that I want to convey, of course, aside from honoring God through my art and showing that love, it's to show like through stories and have people that see my artwork so they can stop and think.
Hmm.
Um, so, like for example, like I have one of my pieces that just sold. It was a symbolic self portrait of myself. So that's kind of like I incorporate a lot of, because I write poetry as well. I've had a few
Mm-hmm.
poems published when I was in college anthologies.
Cool.
So my I incorporate a lot of my poetry into my pieces to kind of interweave and tell a story that way too.
Mm-hmm.
And to for example, I incorporate nature as well. I like to incorporate steampunk elements once in a while and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, day-to-day life experiences, observations that I have, like whether it's interacting with people, with friends, strangers that I meet day to day, or acquaintances, even family,
Mm-hmm.
um, based on just different experiences, how I'm feeling at that particular moment, and even miracles. Miracles are actually um, a big piece as far as a theme in a lot of my paintings. Actually, in all my paintings, they have there's a symbolic miracle in it.
Mm-hmm.
And even in my larger pieces, my my mini paintings, I have mini oil paintings, a mini oil painting series, and I call them mini miracles.
Mm-hmm.
And they're me, and they have more nature inspired things like flowers, bees, butterflies, sort of that thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it has to do with what I mean by miracles is like tiny miracles. There's certain things in life that there's simple things that we tend to overlook and bypass because we see
Right.
them so often. That magic and that special connection that
Mm-hmm.
we see in God's creation. A lot of times we overlook it because our lives are just so fast paced that a lot of times we don't slow down and take a look and breathe
Mm-hmm.
in, take a breath of fresh air and actually appreciate and look at like just things in nature, even just like can be even just like a little tiny butterfly on a flower
Yeah.
or even leaves swaying. It's just as simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what a lot of times what I try to convey in my pieces.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. So your stuff isn't necessarily like a Christian art as far as like you do just paintings of Jesus or something like that. There's much
No,
more
no.
symbolic nature.
Yes.
Okay, that's kind of cool. Is it something that like is there a description that goes along with your art? If I were to see a piece from yours, would I know just by looking at it that it has a Christian theme, or does it not really matter?
Let me see. Like I said, the one that I know that, like I said, that just sold, it's titled A Fragile Bird Held in Large Unseen Hands. And
Mm-hmm.
this, I actually, I posted some photos of it and actually a poetry reading on my TikTok. I have a TikTok as well. And to show kind of like a more in-depth story
Mm-hmm.
behind my piece so people can get a better understanding of what it is. Because when I say a symbolic self-portrait, like for example, that particular piece, it shows hands holding a tiny fragile bird.
Mm-hmm.
And it's supposed to, that is more, I believe would be more obvious. It's supposed to symbolize and show God's hands.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, where I meant of as far as a symbolic self-portrait, it would be like, for example, when I was, like whenever we go through trials in life, a lot of times we feel very, very helpless.
Right.
A lot of times we don't know where to turn. There's that helpless feeling, that sense of desperation of like, what do I do now? Things are out of my control.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a symbolic thing of a lot of times we're like a fragile bird, just at the mercy of God, the mercy of nature, and
Mm-hmm.
just like anything can
Right.
crush the little bird. And I have hands just holding it gently in my painting.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a poem, and my poem actually goes along with that.
Okay.
And that was actually a symbolic self-portrait to myself because of I had a health scare in my mid-20s, and that's a symbolic thing of how I felt emotionally and spiritually during that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to ask about. I'm not Christian, so you've
Okay.
heard of the Serenity prayer, right? Is that something that
Yes.
you relate to? Like that's something I've always like enjoyed. The one where it says, "God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." And it's I
I
think
love
kind of
that.
relates to what you were talking about when you get to those points in your life that you think that are just out of your hand, that you can't do anything. You're just you like in just caught up in the corner, and you don't know what to do. I think that's like something that I kind of remind myself
Mm-hmm.
that there's some things that are just going to be out of my hands, and I guess I get serenity from like these words, because there's certain things that just are out of your hands, but there's things that you can do, and don't dwell so much on those things that you can control. But I mean, things
Yeah.
you can do something about it. I obviously try to do something about it.
No, I understand. And actually, when you brought up the Serenity Prayer, it's an old plaque that my parents have in our living room. We've had it for years, and I've
Mm-hmm.
have that prayer memorized. I've always taken that was one of the few prayers that I've taken comfort with,
Mm-hmm.
just because there's no point, and that's one thing too, when especially when you go through hardships. And like I said, I had a health scare in my mid-20s, and
Mhm.
that's when you go through that time. And it's like I said, it's for me it was a health scare, but it can be anything for anybody. It can be it can be a death in the family. It can be monetary,
Mm-hmm.
like a person can be like with destitute as far as like finances go, and there's that sense of helplessness too. It everybody goes through different things in life.
Mm.
And usually, and then with that, for example, there's one thing I've always, how I've always felt, and this is how I was raised. And then, of course, according to like my biblical upbringing too, there's no point a lot of times, especially when you go through hardships, there's no point in, as I call it, wallowing in self-pity,
Yeah.
like having a pity party for yourself and, oh, woe is me, and expect that type of pity or attention, negative attention. There's
Mm-hmm.
no point because all it's going to do is it's going to make things worse. It's going to make
Yeah.
things worse on yourself. Usually in those type of scenarios, especially like I said, I'm speaking from my own personal example, from my own personal experience.
Yeah.
When you go through that type of hardship and when you reach that brick wall, that stumbling block, that brick wall, and that there's nothing that you can do. Not your own volition, your own strength is not going to help you through it.
Yeah.
Not even your family and or friends or whoever your loved ones are. They're not going to be able to help you in this. So you're all alone.
Mm.
You're all alone in this sense. And that's where it's a lot of times where having faith in God, that's where you really have to, it's that sense of learning to let go and letting go completely. And I'll just say this, and it'll kind of turn into it'll take a darker turn actually, because like I said, when I had my cancer scare, it was the doctors, I'll just put it kind of, it's a long story, but like my father was out of town. He was out of state. My father's a owner operator truck driver. My parents have a trucking business. So my dad was in Georgia at the time. My mom was 5 hours away. So she made a 5 hour when I was in the hospital and they were giving me all these news. My mom made a 5 hour trip in 3.5 hours.
Wow.
So you can, she basically defied all traffic laws and everything. And at the time I remember I had two of my friends with me that were in the ER with me. And they had told, and the doctors were going to release me, and they had told me about a golf ball sized tumor that I had. So, and they had told me that they weren't even, just to put it, I guess, in perspective, they had said that it was sitting in a pool of blood, and the bleeding wasn't stopping. So they rushed me. They had made all the paperwork, rushed me into the nearest hospital down the road, basically. And this was at the time I was living in Killeen in Belton, because I graduated from UMHB in 2012, and I had stayed there. And I was living there at the time in the area. And well, to make a long story short, this is where the miracles come in, I guess, where I'm saying as far as like everything. The doctors couldn't understand how I was comprehending and how I was responsive at the time. So they had basically told me that it was most likely malignant. So they were already prepping me. They were already preparing me mentally and for my family that through surgery that we don't know how much time you have. We don't know how this is going to work. So there was a lot of what ifs.
Yeah.
So it was, like I said, it was one of those things. I remember at the time, my friends in the area were there. And it's kind of interesting because one of my friends actually that witnessed a lot of it. She was one of my best friends that witnessed a lot of it is actually Danielle.
Okay.
We went through a lot together in college. So she knows. She's one of my friends that witnessed quite a bit.
Yeah.
So again, like I said, the doctors didn't know how I was responsive and everything, and I was just fine. They monitored me and whatnot. So, and to make a long story short, my tumor was removed. I had surgery, and praise God, it was benign. So there was, and the doctors couldn't figure out how either, because they were very sure. They basically ruled me out that it was malignant, that I had cancer.
Oh.
And they couldn't explain it. So that's just, and like I said, it's a very long story. I actually have kind of like a little book hidden away in my computer somewhere because I had a book after I kept record and I wrote everything in a book. I wrote a little book about it, kind of just about my experiences and things during that time. I hope to have it published one day.
Yeah.
If I ever get around to it, and it kind of tells more in detail with it. But like I said, that's just kind of like a perspective too, on what I was saying.
How long was that period the cancer scare? How long of a period of time was that?
Let me see. It was March 30th. It was in 2014. I was in the hospital 2 months.
Okay.
I was in the hospital because they were monitoring me. I made jokes about it all the time. It was, because I kind of took the situation very, not lightly, but usually I'm the type of person, that I don't like to kind of have a wallow in self-pity or have a pity party.
Right.
It's kind of like in that particular moment, like it's kind of interesting to say, but like I said, when you're in that particular moment of hardship,
Mm-hmm.
it's a very freeing moment, because I can actually say I had a lot of fun during that time, because when you don't know what to expect.
Right.
You don't know whether it's going to be your last minute or day or whatever, and you just let it go. You make peace. You make peace with God. You make peace with yourself. That's where it's a lot of times too, where forgiveness is a very, very big thing for people.
Mm-hmm.
You have to learn to forgive not only yourself but forgive others. And again, it's a very, very deep thing, and it can, like I say, it can be very, very like freeing once it's gone.
Right.
And I remember like my friends and stuff at the time too. I could tell like a lot of my friends were hurting, but they put on a brave face for me, but you could still see it.
Yeah. Wow.
And for me, I was just having a grand old time. We played tricks, we played pranks on the doctors and a bunch of different things. So we had little parties. I called them little parties in my hospital room. And but so we had fun. We did.
Nice. So you grew up Christian, you were homeschooled. How was that like? Like, was there any rebellious phase from you or anything like that, or that you could think of?
No, actually, it's kind of funny because when I was homeschooled as a child,
Mm-hmm.
and this is really funny. My husband has a joke that I lived under a rock. I was very, very sheltered. My parents, like I say, I grew up in a Christian household. My mom's a minister, so I had that upbringing too.
Mm-hmm.
But I just lived a very sheltered life. A lot of so as far as rebellion, no. Of course, like there was certain things, like as I got older, if I would question or things like that, but I couldn't really say I was overtly rebellious.
Was there any moments where you kind of questioned the faith, or that you can think of anything like that?
No. As far as questioning, no. The only thing I remember, and this is not questioning, but I was more curious into like different beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
I was curious as far as like the differences, and because there's different branches of Christianity. There are. And I always wondered, it's like, why is there so many branches? I'm like, what's the difference between all of these that, aside from my faith? And I remember when I went to college, like I said, I went to University of Mary Hardin Baylor, or UMHB for short. And it's a Baptist university, and I didn't grow up Baptist.
Yeah.
So that was actually, it was a very, very different. Like I said, I have friends from all walks of life. I've had friends, really awesome people. Some were Baptist, Catholic, and some did not have faith. There was some, I think I had some friends, sweet people. Some were agnostic, some were atheist, which was kind of interesting at UMHB because that was very rare. But there was some that were, let me see, Catholic. Like I said, non-denominational. There was quite a bit of differences as far as in faiths that I came across. And I remember my freshman year of college, I visited different churches more out of curiosity. Not because I was wanting to change faith or I was going to be swayed elsewhere. Because how I've always been very grounded. I was born with a very strong foundation, biblically, mentally. So I wasn't worried about getting swayed or being changed or in that sense. It was just, for me, when I would visit churches with friends, it was more like out of curiosity. Because I wanted to see, like, okay, what's the difference here? And sometimes I would sit down and I would listen during sermons, of course. And then there was a couple that freaked me out a little bit, I'll just say. Some were very, very different. There was some that were very different. Kind of a bit of a shock value.
What exactly was it, the things that like kind of freaked you out? Was it
There was one church I remember. I don't remember the denomination, to tell you the truth. It was a Christian church, but I remember when we walked in, there was a person rolling on the floor and was kind of like shaking.
Oh, okay.
Um, I think they're evangelical or charismatic. I don't remember exactly which branch it is,
Uh
but I remember I freaked out when we walked. That was the first thing
huh.
I saw when we walked into the sermon. And I remember I whispered to my friend, I was like, "Where the heck did you bring me? Where
Yeah.
are we?" I was like, I remember it. She was like, "Oh, it's church." Okay, then. Well, let's see how this goes. I'm not coming back though.
Yeah.
And again, that's how I am too. I'm very I like to say, like, as far as the personality too, I'm a blunt person.
Right.
Tactfully, I'll do it tactfully, depending on the person. It depends how the person is. If I know a person can take it, I'll be a little bit more blunt. If I know they're a little bit more sensitive, a
Yeah.
little around there, I'll usually hold back, but
Mhm.
depending who it is. But I remember one of my friends that I was with, she's pretty chill and very lighthearted. So I was like, I knew she would handle it, but I was like, I'm not coming back to this place. This place freaks me out.
Yeah.
But that's just kind of like, those are like just different experiences, like I said. So it's not. I've always been very strongly grounded.
Hmm.
But a lot of times it was just more out of curiosity.
Yeah. That's one thing I noticed that like I've always kind of gotten along with like Christian people. They always, like you say, they had a sense of they were much more grounded than the average person. I'm not sure what that is. Is it the religion itself that makes you much more grounded, or is it
And
just a
that's where
personality thing?
it can be a bit of both, I
Mm-hmm.
suppose. And as far as like with Christianity, I like to say there's a difference between being religious and being a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one thing I always tell people, because when a person is religious, this is like where, like, for example, rituals come in.
Right.
I'll give an example, and this kind of, again, it's going to be a little bit blunt. Like, for example, think of like in Catholicism, like go to mass, you stand up, sit down, say your Hail Marys type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And because I have family that are Catholic, um, I have family that are Catholic, non-denominational, and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But and I'm neither. But so it's and like I say, the repetitive nature. I'm just saying Catholic is just an example, but it can
Yeah.
be any church.
Yeah, I
You go
agree.
either go. Pardon?
No, I was agreeing with you because I was raised Catholic, and that's why I'm not
Oh, okay.
Christian either. Just because I didn't have like a good
Okay.
experience being Catholic, I just stopped going.
Okay. Okay. But no, I was like, I'm stopping myself a little bit. I'm like, I don't know how it would take, but that's just like from observations too. Again,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it I'm speaking from like observation because I've been to like masses, because I had friends when I was in school that were Catholic, and I've been to masses like for funerals or for weddings, for
Mm-hmm.
example. But and even in other churches, it's repetitive. Like you either go to church once a week
Mm-hmm.
and you open your Bible, sit down, sing a few songs, and then you're a completely different person once you leave the church.
Yeah.
That's where religion comes in. It's just a repetitive nature.
Like
You
it's
don't
like
feel it, you just repeat
Yeah,
it.
so it's just like a habit kind of thing.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
I see what you mean.
exactly.
Well, I
Yeah.
was
And
gonna
then
say,
Christianity. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say like quickly about because I was raised Catholic, and then my parents stopped going, and I kept going like with my brothers, and we were going there for like a couple of years. I think we were like 11 or until I think 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
like what you're saying is, it just became like it seemed like it was just repetitive, and it's like more kind of like an indoctrination of something. And there's like a
Yeah.
lot of things that I didn't agree with the priest, because it seemed that there's like a lot of benevolence sort of like shown, but there was like no integrity or no morals behind this. Like, what's the purpose
Mm.
of showing tolerance and kindness, or it's something that's so immoral and like wrong? And this is me when I was like a little kid. I was like 11 or 12. I'm like, oh, okay, like,
Wow.
Like
why am I even coming?
what specifically are you talking about? Like
Because it seemed, I can't remember exactly. This is when I was like 11 or 12. Like, this is back in the 90s.
yeah.
And I remember the priest being a lot more open about, I guess, gays back then, and just you just get there's like a few other things where he's, oh yeah, like they're like, I don't know exactly what it was, but it seemed like he was becoming too liberal.
Mm,
It's almost like he kind of paved to what's happening now. What's
mm,
happening now
Yeah.
with like the drag queens and all that stuff. It
mhm,
didn't seem that far off. So it's almost like he was like slowly opening that sort of like
mm,
opportunity, because what's like I said, what's the point of showing benevolence towards when you don't have any integrity or morals? Like,
mhm,
why should you even?
Exactly.
It's like you're not really even you're
mhm,
not standing for anything. It's like if you're
mhm,
gonna go to, like, I was like, well, if I'm gonna be here and go to the church, I want to like learn something and have a belief in something, in like these moral values. But like it seemed like he was just like little by little, just like um including his own beliefs instead of like what was really, I guess,
right.
preached in the
Exactly.
Bible. And I don't have that much experience with being Christian because I was never Christian. I didn't have too many Christian friends.
Mhm.
Um, I need to really like educate myself more in in that
Yeah,
arena. But I guess I know enough enough to understand the.
yeah.
But and that's why I enjoy doing this too, because like most of the people that we have on here are Christian. And back
Okay.
to
Uh,
and actually back to the point that
yeah,
you
you
made.
said that there's religious people and then there was Christian people. Go to your
Yeah.
Christian. Yeah, go to the other point.
Oh yeah,
Okay. So yeah, basically, well, like I was saying, it's this is that usually religion is usually just a repetitive thing. A lot of times when
Mm-hmm.
people are religious, a lot of it's because it's based on family tradition. One, that's a big one,
Right.
especially in the Mexican community with Catholicism and things like that. It's just something
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah.
It's just something you are. You when you think of it in that psychological and emotional standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
in cultural communities and things like that.
Yeah.
So there's that. It's not necessarily, and with Christianity, it's a feeling. You're, it's knowing that, it's having that faith and knowing God is there for you and accepting God as your Lord and Savior, but you're feeling it and you know it
Hmm.
when you're saved by grace through faith. And when, and during, and knowing that it's a, Christianity is a lifestyle, it's a way of life.
Hmm.
It's not something where you just once a week go to church, say a prayer, sit down, listen to the preacher, and then go out and be like, all right, guys, let's go party, barbecue at our house. And I know, I've known people like that too. And
Mm-hmm.
it's, and like I say, I can, that or I'll get a little blunt with it. Cause to me, it's very self-righteous and it's very hypocritical. That's fake. That's not how Christianity is.
Mm-hmm.
As a Christian, um, you're basically, it's like I said, it's a lifestyle. You're wanting to do to uphold yourself with good morals and principles and as a way to honor God.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of, and that's where I'm saying that a lot of times we have our strengths and that God gives us our gifts and strengths.
Mm-hmm.
Some are gifted as far as discipleship or reaching out. Some are very verbal, and that's where discipleship, evangelism, reaching out, and things
Mm-hmm.
like that. Others through art in a more introverted standpoint where you want to honor God through your art. But it's all in all, it's about leading by example and leading through love.
Mm-hmm.
God's character is all about love. And that's where a lot of times there's a common misconception too. And like I say, I've known people through all walks of life. Some that question God, some are angry, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And like for example, like it's through like miracles, for example. Like they'll kind of like question, like, well, why did God take so and so away, or why is there so much hatred and a bunch of things in the world?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it's like you have to kind of backtrack and actually look at in the standpoint that people there's good and there's bad, just how God is apparent, Satan's very much apparent too.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of times it's looking at it from a very from an in-depth standpoint. It's like we all sin, we all make mistakes. No
Mm-hmm.
one's perfect. Anybody that says they are, they're narcissistic and are in denial. So that's another thing too.
Yeah.
And like I say, you can get into it like in a psychological standpoint with it too. But through sin and all this and the darkness that we see even in life, it's started since the very, very beginning, just little by little, little seeds, little plantings, and then it just spread from there. I like to think of it as sins as like deep embedded roots that started. And again, like I said, it's just that's where Christianity being a way of life. It's about leading by example. And you lead like, well, for example, like you want to lead like how a person, I guess the best way to describe it is like, for example, when a person, like, for example, it can be your best friend, it can be your spouse, girlfriend, or a parent. You want to do the best that you can. You want to be the best person for them out of love because you love them, right? Like you don't want to disappoint that person. That's the best way I can describe it as far as having that Christian love and having that love for God. Because as far as in the Bible, it discusses the theme that we are all children in his eyes. And there's a lot of standpoint, even when you go, that the whole Bible just talks about God's character and God's love, ultimately. But usually most of the time it's seen kind of skirched in shallowly for face value. Like, for example, in the Old Testament, all we see, usually when everybody thinks of the Old Testament, they think of like, he's very angry, he's killing everybody.
Yeah.
It's like, that's like, he's just like smiting everybody. And that's the best way I can kind of describe it, as far as like, that's usually how everybody sees it. But when you think of it from a Christian, from the biblical perspective, it's a lot of it has to do with out of love. And even Christianity, it's not about shackles or being like, oh, well, I can't do this, I can't do that. It's boring. That's usually how most everybody thinks of it. And actually in reverse, because once you develop a relationship with God, it's actually very freeing. There's that piece, again, like I said, it goes back to, like, for example, when you hit a brick wall and things like that. And freeing in the sense that usually nothing is going to phase you. Especially because in the Bible, it talks about when God is with you, who can be against you? And other reassuring verses that say, like in Psalm 46:10, it says, be still and know that I am God. Those are reassuring verses. And like I said, a lot of times, and even honoring ourselves, like honoring God in the choices that we make in life. Like, for example, like, of course, being a giving person. Those are, like, for example, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. It's a proverb.
Yeah.
So, like, just being overall a good person and leading by example, having a giving heart. And of course, like in the 10 Commandments, that guideline is there. And for those are, like I say, I can get really, really deep into it, but those are just basic examples. But of course, there's the standpoint that, of course, when it says to do things out of love for God and a love for your neighbor, for others, it's a lot of it has to do with, of course, like if a person's sinning or if a person's making a mistake, you're gonna bring it to their attention, of course, in a loving way. There's tactful ways of going about it. And this is where I guess I think you had mentioned something about the woke culture. And that's where I'm kind of like, oh,
yeah,
no.
Being a tad later.
It's too, yeah. So that it can kind of get into that too. And it's just like, you're not gonna, like, if a person is doing something, if they're making a mistake and you know it's going to be detrimental to them, whether it's their health or mental health or physical or anything, you're not just going to sit there and let them either make a fool out of themselves or hurt themselves. You're going to bring it to their attention. And again, it's out of love. There's that Christian, there's that agape love.
Yeah.
And even for yourself too, even love for yourself, you're the way we treat ourselves physically, mentally. You're not going to, as far as, and what I mean by that too is a lot of times we are our own worst critic. We can, like, especially we're very hard on ourselves if we make a mistake or things like that. And that's actually bad too.
Yeah. I get into that trap a lot of just being overly critical of myself. And you can really trap yourself doing that. It's not a good mental state for you.
No.
Yeah.
And it has to do even with how we treat ourselves, like as far as like exercising, even eating right, things along that nature. And that's a sense of like honoring ourselves too and honoring God, because our body is a temple. and the New Testament, in the New Testament, it refers to that a lot.
Yeah.
So whatever we put into our bodies, how we treat it. And a lot of it has to do, it's because so we can be our best, most healthy self.
Mm-hmm.
And in order, and of course, to, like I said, to be the best example, and whether it's to lead by example and to show God's love in whatever we do, whether it's preaching, whether it's discipleship, or even just giving a helping hand to others.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times people can go through life and not know what love is, friendship. They may have not heard the word of God in their lives, but a lot of times just being that light to a person, it can be a child, it can be even just a person walking on the street, and even just taking the time and just saying hello, or giving them a smile, or even offering to pray for them.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times that example can leave a lasting impact.
Do you think that you would be relatively the same type of person, personality-wise, if you didn't have Christianity in your life? If you were never in that kind of world?
That's kind of, I don't know, I'll have to think about that for a second. As far as I would imagine a person can be a good person,
Mhm.
but it's like I say, it's I think in a way it would be there'd be a sense of emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I said, it's having that love for God is having like an overall sense of peace and connection.
Right.
And like I said, depending on especially on hard times,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I feel that's where it's kind of where there's the nitty grittiness there.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times people can say they're very, very strong, or they can be the happiest person on the planet, or they can be this nicest person. But a lot of times what makes and breaks a person's fortitude and their character is on hard times. This is where I kind of like to say that a lot of people go through a blessed train, and I call it the blessed train. This is just my own little kind of tit-tat term for it, like, because I see it all over social media, like where people say, oh, I'm blessed, people everywhere, that blessed hashtag, I'm blessed, or blessed to be here, or whatever. And a lot of times it and there's people that are not Christian that use it.
Mm-hmm.
But the point that I'm getting at, it's like I kind of like when I look at those, I kind of think to myself, and I've verbalized it out loud. My husband's heard me. I've said it to friends. I've said it straight out before. I'm like, this is a blessed trend, because okay, and don't get me wrong. I'm like, when people like are proud of their accomplishments, whether they get a new car, they got a new house, job promotion, their kids got an A+ in school. It goes on and on. There's nothing wrong with being proud.
Yeah.
Again, there's nothing wrong with being happy. That's not where I'm getting at. But a lot of it has to do with, for example, okay, you're blessed, you feel blessed. But what happens when something falls down and is gone?
Mm-hmm.
What happens if you lose that car? What happens if you lose your job? What happens if your health fails? What happens when things start crumbling little by little, or just all at once? What are you going to do? Are you going to still have that happy persona, or are you going to be angry and bitter and be flailing out at people and taking out your anger on people? Or if you're a Christian, are you going to be saying, God, why are you letting this happen? Again, it's a lot of it has to do with fortitude. And this is where I kind of say too, that usually, and I don't know, because and this is kind of in a way hard to say, because I've, like I said, I grew up with Christianity all my life. As far as seeing from a non-Christian perspective, the only time I've ever seen it, of course, is just like I say, with friends and acquaintances, when I've ever come across it with people. And I've had family relatives that are very bitter and angry at God too. So I've seen different aspects. So the only thing I can say is like I can, in a sense, like imagine as best as I could. But as far as from my own personal perspective, it's kind of hard to say. The only thing I can say is just that I can't imagine life without God. I think it's far from imagining life without God. I feel there would be an emptiness, because there's that time, like I said, it's like even with those things, that usually When, especially when all else fails, your all volition, your strength, you're just kind of there in
Mm-hmm.
that sense of helplessness. I've always felt like, especially for people, like especially that are, for example, like very agnostic and they're very, very proud. I've seen a lot of people that are very proud.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, but what if your strength fails? Who are you going to turn to? There's like, again, it's that sense of emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
And if you feel that you don't, if you don't have a support system, okay. If you have a support system, that might be still there, but again, it's only to an extent because there's only so much that a family or support system can do.
Yeah.
They can't take the pain away. They can't take the brunt, especially if it's health crisis. They can't take your shots for you. They can't take the surgeries for you.
Yeah.
They can't do that for you. That emotional standpoint, they may be there for you emotionally, but they can only help you to an extent because they really don't know. They can't really imagine what you're going through emotionally or psychologically. They can only like sympathize, but still, there's not really a standpoint. Finances, it might be a little different. Like, for example, a person, family might be able to help out financially if they're able to.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times some families are not able to. So there's that pitfall there. So in a lot of ways, it's like I say, it's without God, I feel it would make a life a lot harder.
Yeah, that's one thing I've like. I think COVID really like put that into the forefront to me. I'm just seeing so many people just freak out over something that you know they've heard can kill them, and like
Hmm.
when I've talked to this kind of stuff with like people that were Christian or had like some kind of religious background to them, they weren't like as panicky as people that you know just didn't know,
Yeah.
didn't have anything. Like they were just so, they can tell that like they wanted to follow something, but they didn't know where to go, where what to hear, what to believe, and I don't know. I'm at a point that even as I admitted agnostic, that I think the average person might need some kind of a religious, I don't know, backbone or belief, just to
That
kind of,
moral backbone, right?
yeah, just to sort of chill them out. I guess you can say, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
because
Go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, in the absence of God, I mean, who takes this place? And I think like what you were saying with COVID-19, like
Mm-hmm.
in 2020, a lot of people, instead of turning to God, they turn to like pseudoscience, this fake science, and they just, oh, okay, well, we'll listen to this.
Yeah.
And I think those were like the more gullible people, and that's why they're trying to completely just eradicate God from like the school system, from everything, from
Mm-hmm.
society. And I don't go to church, but I mean, I have a strong belief in God. I pray every day,
Mm-hmm.
and I try to educate myself as much as possible. But it's just like my upbringing. I think if I wish I would have been like more raised Christian, had like more Christian
Mm-hmm.
family members or people that I think that there is like a um, you need to have like a strong foundation with
Mm-hmm.
God, like whatever, and because that's where your morals come, that's where your principles come.
Yeah, but
Hmm.
for me, it's like, let's say like there really is no heaven or hell. Like it's like the atheists are right.
Down low.
Um, like for the average person, that's a concept that I don't think the average person can handle. That's really gonna make them feel super, maybe lost or lonely. Or I don't know how you put it, but like you'd have to be a specific, like inquisitive person to come to
Yeah.
grasp with that concept. But the regular person, like I said, COVID was just a lot of people just are gonna panic, and like shit's just gonna go downhill from there if they don't have something to sort of, something beyond the television screen to like guide them. You know what I mean? Um,
No, and that's I think that's another thing that really deters people, especially in Christianity, is the concept
mhm,
of heaven and hell, what you're talking about.
mhm,
And actually, that's actually one thing I remember when I studied quite a bit growing up, and it's actually like I said, I could turn it into an entire Bible study. We don't have that time, I suppose, but it's actually a lot more different than what people realize. The Bible actually, we're not. I might get kind of a little bit of antennae going up on this. But the Bible usually talks about, and especially when you look in the original Hebrew and Greek, and even when you actually just look at the Bible in its context, we're not burning for all eternity, or we're not little angels flying up there. And this is where I kind of, this is where my my study and my own knowledge, it differs from a lot of denominations.
Yeah.
So it's actually like I say, it gets really deep into it, because the Bible is, like I say, this is where it kind of delves into, and a lot of people kind of take a step back. That's where people think like, oh my gosh, God is this mean God. He has us burning, or burning for all eternity. There's that all engulfing hellfire, and then there's the concept of like, they just like either you go to heaven or you go to hell. Yeah. And in reality, actually, the Bible does not. There's no, like, there is a hellfire and there is heaven, of course, but it's discussed. It's discussed in a completely different way than what most denominations teach. Like, I'll give an example. Like, for example, and again, this is like a very, very heavy topic. Like most of the time people believe that, of course, you go, but you're actually, once you're gone, you're gone. You're sleeping. Actually, in the original Hebrew and the Greek, death actually is referred to as a sleep. Cool. It's actually, and this is where I kind of, another reason why I kind of like for myself, like in my own case, it's like when I went through my health scare and things like that, I was never afraid of death. Yeah. Not something that ever scared me, because it's like in the Bible, it talks about death is actually asleep. So think of, like, for example, it's like I say, it can go really deeply into it, but it talks about like whenever, like, for example, of a person passes away, it's like death is referred to in the Bible, I believe in the original Hebrew and Greek, as just like, it's like if a person just goes to sleep and takes a nap. Right. And then they wake up when Christ comes in the second coming. And that's actually how sleep is. And I'll kind of like in Ecclesiastes 9:5, this is like a very specific verse. And there's a lot more verses that actually coincide with it. But just to give you an example, Ecclesiastes 9:5 talks about that the dead remember nothing. They basically remember nothing and are nothing. The memories of them have passed, and they're just completely in the grave. So in that sense, that completely debunks and completely goes away with the concept of like you go straight to heaven or hell. Yeah. And another thing too, think of, like, for example, we've all been to funerals at one point or another. Think about, like, there can be people, and it doesn't have to be just people that we know, but people in general. There can be people that have gone like to funerals and think of, oh, for example, it can be this really horrible person in life. It could have been this really bad person. Yeah. And then the preachers or priests or whoever, they preach him to heaven. It's like, oh, he's up there looking down at us right now. And think about it. There's that. I'm kind of saying it in a sarcastic manner. Yeah, because like I say, everybody, regardless if a person was good or bad, it could be like a mafia person for all I know. And then, like, think about it, like, because there's a lot of people, like, even it doesn't matter, cartel, mafia, could be the worst people on the planet, and a lot of them are religious. But whenever they go to funerals, so and so is preached up to heaven. They're going to heaven, and they could have been the worst person in life. Yeah, we don't know. We don't know how that person is, and of course, there's some people that were good, of course. But it's that concept. It's and it's really interesting, because in history, that was actually a traditional concept that was brought in, and it was actually, that's not a biblical concept of being preached to heaven or preached to hell. So, and it goes back into history too. This can, that's what's really beautiful about the Bible. When you compare history and the Bible, it fits together like a puzzle piece.
Yeah.
Everything goes hand in hand with everything. Everything, when you look back in a lot of historical, like the Roman Empire, Medo-Persian Empire, the Greeks, everything. When you look back at the timelines and everything in the Bible, everything fits together. And that's what's actually really cool about it. I love history. I'm like a big history person. I like to look into things, even even as far as like with like different ancient history too, and different ancient translations and stuff like that. I like to kind of look into it because that's one thing with Christianity too. A lot of people tend to take what the preachers say at face value. They're like, oh, I guess it's right. And a lot of preachers are human too. They can have error. And that's what's really bad a lot of times when it comes to like in Christianity and faith. To really understand God's character and to really understand the Bible, you have to read it from its context. To really understand the context and read it, a lot of times that because there's several verses in the Bible that talk about we have to like in 2 Peter 1:20, for example, it talks about people, or it talks about like not basing scripture on private interpretation. And private interpretation means like, for example, like, oh, like you take a verse and be like, oh, I think it means this. And a lot of times we have a tendency, because again, we all have a tendency to take things at an emotional value. It's like there's certain verses, there's Bible verses or scriptures or passages that can easily be taken out of context. If you're looking at it from a skewed perspective, like it can be from an emotional perspective, a hurt perspective. Like for example, like a lot of people in general, especially like with, I can even go into like even as far as like abortion and homosexuality and things like that.
Yeah.
There's some verse in the Bible that a lot of people take out of context, and it's like, don't. There's a verse, I believe it's in Matthew. It talks about, "Do not judge me." And then it's kind of, and there was a meme that was that I came across years ago. And it's kind of interesting because there's a Bible and it talks about do not judge, and then everything is scratched out in black marker. I'm like, oh, no, that's not how it works. And that's what I'm saying. And but the whole thing about it is, it's like, hey, yes, you come as you are. Yes, you're a sinner. God's gonna love you, but you still have to make some changes. I'm like, you're not gonna, just because once you're a Christian, you're a new person. That's where it's like, that's where the symbolism of whenever a person's baptized, that's a symbolism when you die to self. You die to yourself, you become a new person. Yes, you're gonna make mistakes. I'm like, that's not saying like, oh, Christianity, you're all perfect, holy saint. No one's a saint.
Yeah.
You're not just gonna become this old pristine little angel overnight. That's not how it works. As long as we make mistakes, but as long as you have conviction, you feel bad, and you ask God for forgiveness, don't do it again.
Yeah.
Learn your lesson.
I think people can redeem themselves. Everybody is capable of sin, and a lot of people go down the wrong path. And I think the reason why a lot of people sin and indulge in all these immoral things is because they don't believe in heaven or probably even hell. And that's why they keep doing it. And in my opinion, I think that's what hell is that anybody that does not repent like all their sins, I think that's like something that they think that when they die, they just go to sleep. But I think they're never gonna really like forget all the sins that they committed on earth. Like they're gonna burn on all those sins that they did while on earth. If they don't, I think that's why the whole thing with Chris, I think that's part of what it is. And but if you're able to repent, even all the sins that you've done, I think that's a way of salvation to like just just dying with peace and being like, okay, like I was here, I made some mistakes, but I asked for forgiveness. I changed my ways. I think that's what heaven is just like dying in peace. And
Yeah.
And it's interesting, like we none of us know what happens like afterwards, but all I can say
No.
is my brother actually had like an out of body experience where he almost died. So
Wow.
I don't
Hmm.
think we completely die, but like that's why I have the beliefs that I have,
Hmm.
and I never understood it's like God fearing uh, God or God fearing Christian, because if you go to hell, I think it's because you did it to yourself. Like God didn't do anything. Like you committed the sin and you burn in hell because you committed all those sins throughout your life.
Hmm.
But if you're able to like be honest and be, I guess, humble enough to just say, okay, I messed up. Like I think that's where you can actually die in peace.
Yeah.
No, it's an interesting idea. And a lot of times too, it's that's where free will comes in.
Hmm.
Because God doesn't force us. That's the beauty of his love too. He doesn't force us to follow him. We can do whatever we want. It's that's what the beauty of his love. It's free for us to take.
Hmm.
We can take it or leave it, and that's it. He's not gonna like he's not this autonomous person that God that's gonna be like forcing us to hold our hands and like love me.
Yeah.
That's not how his love works. And that's where it's free too.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it's and that's where it's even in like in just in general, that's where repentance comes in. When we understand and we know we make mistakes, but as long as we own up to them, admit them to ourselves and admit them to God, of course. And then there's different types of repentance. And a lot of times repentance is just for ourselves and in between us and God. No one else has to know, especially depending everybody makes mistakes and things like that.
Hmm.
And as long as we have that sense of conviction, and that's where the Holy Spirit comes in. Once and when we have that sense of conviction, that's where it's really that's a good thing. And a lot of times that's where a lot of people fail is when you lose that sense of conviction. That's where our heart hardens, and at that point, God work can't work in us anymore once we harden our hearts. And that's where it kind of that's an entirely different story. But it'll that's considered in the Bible the unpardonable sin.
Damn. We're almost at an hour, and I haven't asked you at all about being a new mother.
Oh,
I mean, that's the main thing I wanted to talk
into it.
about. But I mean, would you like to come back and talk about that, or just try to go uh, quickly about the motherhood stuff? I guess I guess we could touch on it a little bit right now.
Yeah,
Just to see where it goes. Okay, so you're a new mom,
yeah.
first time. Uh, what's changed for you since?
Aside from the fact that we have a new little human living in the house,
Mm-hmm.
that's a big transition. But as far as everything, like I said, I've as a mom, I've learned to like you have to be as far as more selfless. Baby comes first.
Mm-hmm.
My little boy, he comes first. So that's and it's just a lot of it has to do with time management too.
Mm-hmm.
Time management has never been my strong suit, and I'm having to like really develop and strengthen it,
Mm-hmm.
especially like with his schedule. My time, whether it's creating or whether it's doing things around the house or just doing things in general, it revolves around my son's time.
Right.
So a lot of times, like even when I'm, for example, like creating in the studio, usually I try to do everything usually in between his nap times, which is probably like a 2 hour window,
Mm-hmm.
sleepy window, or or even if it's doing things around the house, whether it's like taking care of like my garden outside or cleaning or just doing household stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And even and the only time too that I can say like I'll get a little bit of a breather. Like for right now, for instance, like my husband's with our baby right now. Um, it can be like example like when my husband's home from work.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, like I'll get a little bit of a break, like when I'm cooking or different things, because I'm usually my husband, when he starts playing his trombone, our baby gets very entertained. He loves jazz music. So it's a change of pace. So other than that, it's an adventure. I call it an adventure. It's been an adventure, a lot of comic relief.
Do you, the moment that you gave birth, like that moment, was there anything, I don't know, like spiritual that happened? Because I've heard people mention stuff like that. Like there's this weird realization of life, I guess you could say. Was there anything similar that happened to you? Like
For me, it was a mixture of I guess it was like a kind of like a shock. I was in shock,
Mm-hmm.
especially because of I was just happy and praising God because my baby was healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing too. Like my pregnancy was actually kind of rough because we had a bit of health scares with our baby,
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit during the time. That's like another story entirely. But so just knowing that he was healthy, and there was comic relief actually at his birth too, because because I had an emergency C-section. So
Oh, wow.
while they were during that time, and actually when he was birthed, during right when he was born, the doctors were kind of talking amongst themselves, and they were just, and all I heard, I remember, I was like, oh, right when he was born, he just started like wailing and crying, like screaming bloody murder. He was not happy. Like he sounded angry. It was like angry cries.
Yeah.
And the doctor, they're like, oh, well, we don't have to do anything. He's crying. He's like, as a parent, I guess they kind of slap him or slap their butt or something
Yeah.
of that to kind of make him cry or something. So I couldn't see anything, but I was just kind of like, what in the world I was just thinking to myself, what is going on back there?
Mm-hmm.
Give me my baby already. I was kind of like, at this point, I was just, and then all of a sudden I heard another doctor say, he kicked me. He just kicked me. He kicked me again. This baby's kicking me. So I was like, okay, thank God he's fine. So like just comic relief like that. And
He's
of
gonna be
course,
like
like
I want to say he's gonna be a famous soccer player when he grows up. Sorry.
Or a karate master or something like that.
Oh yeah, there you go.
I plan to train him when he's older. So but no, it was the feeling is actually, it's a very indescribable feeling. Just right when they brought my baby to me, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm a mom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a mom. It was that realization had hit.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I knew I was going to be a mother because,
Yeah.
well, when you're pregnant, it's very obvious.
Yeah.
You can't hide it. And at that point, and it was kind of funny because on the day of, I didn't even know I was in labor.
Yeah. Really? Wow.
I didn't even know. I was just kind of like, oh. And I called the hospital, I remember, and a nurse that had told me, like, you need to make your little butt down to the hospital. You're in labor.
Wow.
Oh, okay. I was like, James, get the car. I guess we're going. But so like I just like to think of like my life and everything is just kind of little comic relief. And even with that too.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, praise God, like my husband, he was and the crazy thing about it was actually the day of that I went into labor, his recruiter had called and they were going to ship him out and have him fly out for basic that day.
Wow.
But then when he had to call him, he called, my husband had called the recruiter back and I had asked, like, my wife's in labor. So they had to, like, the recruiter had to make a whole bunch of calls and pull a few strings to say, okay, there's like a family emergency and whatnot. So praise God, they were able to like move his like his shipment date. Like, oh, so because he was about to leave that day.
Wow.
And then, and thankfully the first 2 days that my husband got to see my baby and things like that, and then he had to leave. And then I was still in the hospital. I hadn't been discharged yet. Me and our baby still hadn't been discharged yet. And then and then during labor, I had tested positive for COVID. So they had me quarantined in a room. So I was just there like in a little prison cell. I called it a prison cell. But so I couldn't get out and walk around. I had to do my little walking exercises in the room. So that was quite fun.
Yeah, like how. That's the one thing that I was really, because I know a couple people that gave birth during COVID, and like seeing like, you know, like certain people can't come in to see the baby and all that kind of stuff. Like that environment was really.
Yeah.
Was it the same for you? Like no one could come in?
Yes. Well, for me, it was in the hospital that I gave birth in, they were very strict. It was I believe it was only like one visitor at a time.
Mm,
Like the only one that was able to be in there, of course, was my husband
right.
for obvious reasons. But as far as visitors, but then that was cut off entirely because in the middle of my labor, they're like, oh, I don't know what possessed them to check me for COVID in the middle of labor, but they're like,
Yeah.
hold on a second. Well, because I had I think well, at the time I had a fever in the middle of labor, so I guess that had to do with it, which was kind of random because I was fine that following earlier in the night when they hospitalized me, I was fine. I didn't have anything, no symptoms or whatever. And I was still like, and apparently during labor, I was running a fever. So they checked me and then lo and behold, they're like, oh, by the way, you're positive. We're going to have to quarantine you. Oh, that's nice. Thank you. So nobody was allowed to go in. So it was a lot of pulling strings. Like we had to constantly, every nurse that I had, day and night nurse, I had to tell them, like, they had to give my husband special permission just to leave the room, just to get my things. Because we had to tell them, my husband's in the military. He's in the National Guard. He's going to be leaving. I'm going to be by myself. I need my things. So we had to constantly be telling people that.
Yeah.
And so they had to constantly be giving special permission for him to just leave the room because we weren't even allowed to leave. He wasn't even allowed to leave either. We were all quarantined. And when my husband left, I was by myself. And of course, I had to give get special permission again, just for my parents to come pick me up.
Wow.
And my mom, when she came up and to get me, my in-laws were waiting. My in-laws and my parents were all waiting in their cars in the front and everything, waiting for us to come out. And my mom had to be, I called it the hazmat suit. She had to be like in complete gear just to go get me. They wouldn't let her in otherwise. It looked kind of interesting and funny.
Jesus. Yeah.
And then, and it's kind of interesting because this was the second time I had COVID, because actually during my pregnancy, my husband and I had gotten COVID. And that was scary. That was a very scary time.
Did it hit you bad or no? Because I had it twice, and both times I was totally fine. I think I had the sniffles for the most part. That was it.
It was when the very first time I got it was during my second trimester. And I had a slight fever, and that I went up. It didn't go up higher than 99, and then I was just very fatigued. But then it was kind of every time they would ask me my symptoms, I would say I'm fatigued already. So I don't know if it's COVID fatigue or pregnancy fatigue.
Yeah.
What should I say? I would tell everybody that. I would just joke. But praise God, what was really good during that time is, well, it wasn't good. I was mortified, actually. You have no idea. I was mortified during that time because I was just because my husband had gotten COVID and he got it very bad, actually. But, and we were already kind of mentally prepared because at the time, because he's a band director at a high school here in the area. So there was a lot of cases in the band already. So we were kind of like mentally preparing. It's just like, it might happen sooner or later. We were like already like mentally. So when it happened, when he tested positive, we weren't really surprised. I was in shock and I was sad. So we were quarantined in our home for a month.
Wow.
And it was ugly because he was on one side of the house and I was on the other. And for us, it was terrifying because I was afraid like for the baby. So I was thinking, like, what if like with COVID and things like that, what if it like affects my pregnancy? That was what was very terrifying. And thankfully my doctor squeezed in an antibody infusion. And I got an antibody infusion about, I believe it was 2 days later. So I don't know how the antibody infusion treatments are in other states, but with us, it was I believe in Texas, it was a free treatment, especially for high risk patients. And since I was further along my pregnancy, I was considered very high risk.
Mm-hmm.
So they squeezed me in right away. And basically they have you to like a drip machine, and the antibodies, what it does, it's just to strengthen your immune system.
Mm-hmm.
So praise God, thankfully my symptoms were pretty mild. Well, compared to my husband got it, like I said, he got it really bad. It was very scary actually for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And with me, with the antibody infusion, I had a fever for maybe like a day, and that was it.
Yeah.
I was just very, very tired mostly.
Did you say
And
you got this
Yeah.
fever when you were in labor, and then you tested
Yeah,
COVID?
yeah, because I had COVID twice, and the second time I got it was actually during labor, so that was not fun.
I would think that maybe going through labor would attribute a little bit to your fever, wouldn't it? Just if you think about
Well, because there was a slight complication because I had a fever, and they had to and that's what resulted in my emergency C-section, because it was
Okay.
they had said that my baby's heart rate was going up because of the fever, so they needed to do the emergency C-section as quickly as possible. So that was a contributing factor to it too. And I had a uterine infection to top it all off. So there was like a whole bunch of little things stacked up in it.
Wow.
It was not a fun experience whatsoever.
Yeah, I imagine like it kind of psychologically threw you off, like letting you know that, and I think that probably like raised his heart rate like higher. So it's like a domino effect.
Well, in a way, like I said, because and actually, like I said, my pregnancy was kind of rough actually, and especially because actually a couple weeks before that, they tried to induce my labor due to and this is like a whole bunch of crazy nonsense. They thought there was a false alarm. The doctors thought I had an arrhythmia. My baby had an arrhythmia. So
What is that?
What's that?
An arrhythmia means an irregular heartbeat.
Oh, okay.
It all started at a regular checkup that I had. And during my checkup, my doctor, every prenatal visit, they check the baby's heartbeat. They check to see like how the belly growth and stuff like that. And they check the heartbeat of the baby every single time.
Interesting.
It's just for precautions and to check for abnormalities and things like that. It's procedure. And well, my doctor, she freaked out. I remember she was like, the baby's heartbeat. I said, it sounds like there's an arrhythmia. I was like, you're going to have to go get checked at the main hospital. Okay. So I ended up going, and then again, I was just kind of like, okay, fine, just routine, whatever. And then the nurses that hooked me up to a machine to double check the baby's heartbeat, they had said that they found an arrhythmia and that they were going to have to like induce my labor pronto, pretty much. Like it was an emergency induction.
Wow.
So I was like, so for me, I was getting like, you got to be kidding me. I was getting aggravated.
Was that a white guy saying that? It's like, we're going to have to induce this pronto. Was that a white guy?
No. Well, it was a white nurse. It was a white nurse, but no, it was most of the people that oversaw me were female.
Oh, okay.
So I probably would have been weirded out if it had been a guy. I really would have. I would be like, can I have a woman, please? I would not have. But no, it was that was very scary because they didn't really give us much input. They just said there was an arrhythmia. They thought that they had spotted an irregular heartbeat in my baby, and that freaked everybody out. And I had driven to the hospital, which kind of it freaked out my parents and it freaked out my in-laws. They're like, "What are you driving so far along?" I was like, well, I have to get here somehow. Like, I'm not going to be waiting. I'm not going to be waiting around for people. Yeah. So I ended up going, and then my parents rushed over, my in-laws rushed over, and they took me by ambulance, and they tried to induce me that night. But make a long story short, lo and behold, it did not happen. I was just basically, I felt that I was in a torture chamber because they were trying to induce my labor all night long for the first 24 hours. They kept checking me to see if I was ready to go into labor. Didn't happen. So basically, my baby, I felt it was like, I felt in a way that it was God saying too that he's going to come out when he's good and ready. When I say he's good and ready,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to be today.
Ready, kick.
But yes. So in other words, and they gave me like induction drugs and things like that. So I was already mentally preparing for labor that night.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it happened, I basically that about 72 hours later, so it was on I believe it was on a Tuesday or Wednesday night. And then on Friday, they said, "Oh, if the baby's not coming, the baby's not coming, you can go home."
Weird.
So I was like, I went through all this torture for nothing. I got so aggravated.
Mm.
And then they double checked my baby's heartbeat, and my baby was fine. They double checked it again before we left, and like, oh, he's fine. Which I knew. I had faith that he was going to be that he was fine anyway. But I was just kind of I was very, very aggravated, and my husband was not happy either. We're just kind of like, so I went through all of this torture for nothing. For nothing. So it was not, that time was not fun. So, and then about 2.5 weeks later, that's when I actually went into labor. So at this point, I'm kind of like, I kind of had exhausted myself from the false labor before. So now I was kind of just,
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done.
All right. I guess we'll start winding down the show because we've kind of gone pretty long. I guess lastly, you have your what's it called? The Creatives for Christ thing. If you want to just say what that is.
Okay, so Creatives for Christ is an art ministry that my friend Danielle and I do, and it's open to all creatives, different mediums. It's not limited to just art per se, like painting or drawing. It can be digital art, it can be singing, music composition, you can play instruments. It can be even poetry, story writing.
Mm-hmm.
And what it is, it's we just get together, and it's a way of honoring God through our creative gifts, whatever they are. And in all skill levels, you don't have to be a professional. It can be there can be beginner artists or even hobbyists. And just a way, of course, to honor God and as a way to decompress too.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys like share your art through that, or you just kind of have a bit of a discussion, or how does it work?
It's both. What we do is we have usually at the beginning of our meetings, we show our artwork. We meet bi-weekly. So every other week we meet, and actually we're going to have a meeting tomorrow. But what we do is we have our theme is based around a Bible verse for us to kind of like to kind of read over and just to kind of think about, study. And what we do is create artwork revolving around that verse, around that theme for the particular week. And usually when we do in the first part of the study, we share our artwork, whatever it is, and we discuss the artwork, like the colors, what inspired this subject, or the colors. So for example, like if it's a painting, like I primarily do painting, so a lot of it is mostly paintings. And we just kind of discussed like the artwork and how it was how the Bible verse inspired it. And that's what we do initially in the first part. And then once everybody has a chance to talk about their artwork and discuss it and things like that, make comments, feedback, whatnot, then we get into like the Bible study portion, which is like around the verse. And we talk about what the verse is talking about per se. And we go over just different, like I said, it's just initially like a Bible study after that. And then we just close it off, have a word of prayer, and usually that's it. But that's we usually, at first we would meet through Zoom. Now we're meeting through Facebook because we have a fairly small group.
Right.
So that's what we're doing for now.
That's cool. All right, I guess we'll kind of end it there. I guess if you want to plug anything that you're doing, your art page. Hannah?
Plug it in?
I mean, advertise or,
Oh, sorry. I was like, do I type it in the comments?
No.
Okay. So right now, sorry. So my, I have like my main pages, all my art pages, they have I have a link tree. So it's Linktree / Hannah Quintero art.
Mm-hmm.
That's my art business handle. All my pages, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, those are my main social media icons where I post a lot. I even have a YouTube channel. I post
Mm-hmm.
art vlogs and time lapses.
Cool.
And those usually like that's where I'll post like little snippets, whether it's artworks in progress, different things. My online shop where I sell my original paintings, whether it's art prints and other art pieces, it's on my Ko-Fi shop. Again, all of them are under Hannah Quintero Art. And I have, and like I said, my link tree has all my handles like all in one spot. So there's not really a scramble to find which one is which.
Yeah.
Everything's just kind of there.
All right. All right, cool. I guess any last words, Benevolent?
I was just gonna say thanks for coming on, Hannah, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's a fun show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to get more into like motherhood and stuff, but ran short on time. Maybe another episode you can join us and get more into it.
Yes, definitely.
I'd like to talk about more about like parenting and stuff like that, but I guess we'll hold it for next time. All right.
Are you becoming a dad or?
Yeah, it's complicated.
Thinking about it?
All right. I guess we'll end it there. Thank you guys for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. Thank you, Hannah, for being on. Benevolent, always a pleasure. And see you guys. Peace.
All right. God bless y'all. Have a good night.